figure out how to mute everybody.
Looks like everybody's muted. I'm not. You can hear me, right?
Yes, you're good. Everybody else
Okay,
is muted. I'm going to actually switch up to my headset, but
cool.
take it away.
Okay, I'm gonna share screen here. Let me just share screen. Okay, and all right. Can everybody? Is that filling your screen? It should say myth, magic, and masonry. Looks good. Cool. Okay, so this presentation is about a book that I wrote a couple years ago, 2018, and in August of 2018. And it's been received pretty well. I think a lot of people like it. I've been asked to speak all over the place behind it, and people have solicited articles and things from me. And it's, I'm happy with the work that the publisher did on it. It was put out by the Laudable Pursuit. They're the people who put out P.D. Newman's Alchemically Stoned and a couple other things. And they're really great Masons out of Oklahoma. So props to them for doing a good job on this book. They made it look really nice, and people seem to like it. So my my thesis throughout the book has to do with the Analucas. So I know that there are some non-Masons on here, or other people who may not be fully conversant with what that means. It's Latin for the year of light. Anno, the year. Lucas, hard C, because it's Latin. The year of light. So the year of light um, is 4000 BCE, you would say, using the current dating system, right? So right now it's 6020 AL. So in the Anno Lucas Masonic dating system, it's 6020 AL. You just add 4,000 years. So if we were to go back to that Anno Lucas, and this is kind of my setup here. If we were to go back to that Anno Lucas, we would find at 4000 BCE that we are in what's called the Taurian age. And I'll explain what that means throughout. But in case maybe you have my book or you've seen it before, you've seen the cover or anything, you'll notice that there is a minotaur with a zodiacal wheel here. So those two things are in reference to, maybe you thought, why is there, this is myth, magic, and masonry, why is there a minotaur and a zodiacal wheel? Well, this is why, because the thread weaving through the entire work is based on this Anno Lucas and on this year 4000 BCE. That was what's known as the Taurian age. And why is that so? Well, I'll tell you. Because of a phenomenon. Now here's where it gets a little sciencey. So there's a phenomenon known as axial precession, right? So it's this slow gyration of the Earth on its axis, on its polar axis, which causes the northern sort of orientation to move over the course of a long, long time. So when that happens, the best way for me to explain this is that you know how the vernal equinox, the spring equinox in March, it's usually March 20th, thereabouts. So it occurs in Aries, right? It's the mark of the beginning of Aries. It's the first point of Aries, right? So that's when on the eastern horizon, on the vernal equinox, the sun rises in Aries, the constellation Aries. So now that point, what they call the vernal equinoctial point, actually precedes by 1 degree every 72 years. So every 72 years, that point has been preceding by 1 degree, right? And over the course of 2,160 years, it goes through a complete 30-degree sign of the zodiac. Because real quick, you know that the signs, there are 12 of them. You probably are familiar with the sun signs, the zodiacal signs. So those zodiacal signs are 30 degrees, and there are 12 of them. And if you add that up, that makes the 360-degree circle that is the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun as viewed from Earth, right? So that equinoctial point has moved through Aries, through Pisces, and is right basically on the cusp of Pisces and Aquarius right now. But if we follow that back, we'll do that in a second. But so hopefully that's clear, because that's kind of important, is that this equinoctial point, that this vernal equinoctial point kind of conditions the symbolism of the cultures at the time. And I'll get into more what that means in a second. Incidentally, the vernal equinox is anciently the new year. That's the beginning of the year, you know, because it's the spring, right? It got moved in the Gregorian and Julian calendars much later. It got moved, you know, January and February were added. Janus, January, looking forward and backward, like the two-faced Janus that you may have seen. So there is evidence that that the vernal equinox is the beginning of the year. There is evidence even in our months, because if you count from March, if you call March the first month, March, that's where the vernal equinox occurs. If you say March, April, May, June, July, August, September, by the time you get to 7, you're at September. By the time you get to 8, you're at October. Octo, like octogram, octagon, octomom. 9, November. 10, December. Anybody who knows Spanish or Latin knows that, you know, or Greek, deca, decimal, you know, 10, it's the 10th month. So, so you could see the evidence of the vernal equinox being the beginning of the year, even in our calendar today. And here's an old block calendar that kind of shows March right here, April, May. But this is after January and February were added. So moving that equinoctial point back to the period between 1 CE, so the dawn of the Common Era, till about, you know, maybe 2160. Let's just say we'll round it into 2, instead of saying 2160 years for each precessional epoch, we'll just say 2000 years to keep the math clean. So the dawn of the Common Era, right? 1 CE, 1 AD if you prefer, to today will have been what they call the Piscean age, because in tropical astrology, or in the tropical system that we use in the West, and even that NASA uses, the sun has been rising in Pisces for the last 2,000 years. So over the course of the last 2,000 years, we've had an abundance of Piscean symbolism, right? This has been the era of Christianity. It was ushered in by Jesus Christ, right? Whose name, Christos, right? Or the ichthys. You ever see the ichthys fish? That's iota, chi, theta. I forget what the Y is. Epsilon, maybe, and then sigma. ichthys. Now, if you know anything about fish, that's like that's the Greek word for fish. So if you look up fish medicines or any of the fish's genus, species, and things like that, you'll see ichthys all over the place, and that's why that was used as an acrostic for Jesus, because it's Yesu Christos, that's Iota key, Yesu Christos Theos, I forget what that one is, and then Savior. Um, so it's Jesus Christ, Savior, Son of God. That's what it is. Jesus Christ, Son of God. It's like an acronym, but they call it an acrostic. So you'll notice this shape, if you could see my mouse tracing this mandorla, they call it in Italian, but it's geometrically known as a vesica piscis, a vesica piscis. And a vesica piscis precisely means, in Latin, it means a fish bladder. So we notice that Jesus, is in this fish bladder during this Piscean age, right? There's Pisces, the two fish in stained glass. Here's the feeding of the 5,000, where there were two fishes on a plate, and what, like 2 loaves of bread or a loaf of bread, I forget what, but there were two fishes. There were the two fishermen who, here's Jesus without the beard, but he found the two fishermen and the two brothers who were fishing. So there's all of this. Oh, and plus he was known as the Lamb of God and the Fisher of Men. And this is a good segue into the what you call the Aryan age, because of Aries, Arian, the Aryan age. Now that is because Jesus was the Alpha and the Omega, right? He said he was the beginning and the end. And he said he was the Lamb of God while simultaneously being the Fisher of Men. So this is him in his Piscean form, the Fisher of Men. However, what preceded him was the Aryan age, the age of the ram, the age of Aries. And what is a baby ram? It is a lamb, right? So that's why he's the beginning and the end, because Aries technically begins the zodiacal belt, while Pisces ends it. So that's 0 degrees and 360 degrees. So he did straddle the beginning and the end. He did straddle the alpha and the omega of the ecliptic. And he was simultaneously the Lamb of God, because he came from Aries, and the Fisher of Men, because he ushered in the Piscean age. So before him, let's say the period from from 1 BC or 1 BCE till about 2000 BCE, you get a lot of Aryan or ram-like symbolism here. You get at Ramesses, right, at the Avenue of the Sphinxes, they call it, in I think it's Luxor. It might be I thought it was Luxor Temple. We went there a few years ago, where they have the Avenue of the Sphinxes. But it is certainly what you would call an Aryan age structure, because during that 2,000-year period, the sun was rising in Aries at the vernal equinox. So that celestial phenomenon was symbolized in the culture of the people. And you'll notice these are all pictures of Moses, or sculptures of Moses. There he is with the tablets of sacred law here. And you'll notice that he has the budding horns of a ram. Now, these are sometimes explained otherwise, that they are actually representing light, and but it's interesting that there are so many ram-like representations of Moses, especially when you look at that vis-a-vis Jupiter Ammon. This is Jupiter Ammon, who clearly was depicted with ram's horns. Jupiter Ammon, Ammon Ra, etc. They were sort of syncretized. This is what you would call the Hellenistic period representation. You know, after the Greeks were inhabiting essentially all of Egypt, but particularly Alexandria. And you'll notice that oh, and here is Khnum, a ram god from the lower, or actually the lower cataracts on the Nile. So lots of Aryan symbolism, lots of ram symbolism here. Now this one, it kind of segues us into, here I just admitted John Gilliland. This one sort of segues us into the preceding age. So we've seen that that there was the 2,000-year period of Piscean age, Piscean symbolism, and that was from about 1 CE till, let's say, today and maybe a little beyond. And then there was the period from about 1 BCE or 1 BC all the way till 2000 BCE, and that was this period when the sun rose heliacally in the sign of Aries during the vernal equinox. But you'll notice there is Moses blowing the shofar, the ram's horn, and he blew that at some point after, there we go, at some point after he had come down, I forget which mountain, maybe Sinai. He had come down and he saw them worshiping the golden calf. You know that story. And he, at some point after this period, blew the ram's horn as if to usher in the age, the Aryan age. But what this golden calf represented the last vestiges of those who were still clinging to the symbolism of the Taurian age. And the Taurian age spanned from about 2000 BCE till about 4000 BCE. So that's 6,000 years ago from today. So there was a 2,000-year period where the sun rose on the vernal equinox in the sign of Taurus, because remember, we're preceding. It's the precession of the equinoxes. So during that 2,000-year period, we see an abundance of Taurian symbolism and very little ram symbolism and probably zero Piscean symbolism, which is funny that all of these, you know, it's interesting that all of this Taurian bovine symbolism would inhabit that period, but not the next 2,000-year period per se, right? You know, we see the Apis bull in Egypt. We see Cretan, you know, in Crete, the Cretan bull leaping that they would do. We see the Gavivodata of Persia. We see in India, I forget what they call there's a name, Apana, I forget the name of their bull, but pardon me on the Eastern mythology, I don't know it as well as the Western. So that symbolizes, again, the vernal equinox in Taurus. So here's what we had during that period. This is from Frank Higgins' Hermetic Masonry. I've always loved this picture because it really shows the Taurian age. It shows the bull hosting the spring equinox, the vernal equinox. It shows the lion at the keystone here of this, what you might call a royal arch. You know, the lion at the keystone at the summer solstice. It shows Scorpio, anciently conflated with Aquila, the eagle, as we'll get into, at the autumnal equinox. And then at the winter solstice, the Aquarius, the water bearer. So this is this is the fixed signs of the zodiac, you would call that. And this was the situation of the heavens during that 2,000-year period. And it commenced at approximately 4,000 BCE. And like we said right there on top of this presentation, 4,000 BCE is the Anno Lucas. That's the year of light. That's our, so what I found, what made me want to write that myth, magic, and masonry, was that I was finding all this Taurian uh, symbolism, and particularly in masonry. And I figured that maybe they were trying to tell us something, the architects of the craft. Maybe they were trying to tell us something. Look to 4,000 BCE, because that's the vantage point from which you will be. It is a key to our symbolism, along with other things, along the way that seem to only make sense from this temporal vantage point. The temporal vantage point is, again, the Anno Lucas. So, speaking of the fixed signs, the bull, the lion, the man, and the eagle. Remember, the eagle is also the scorpion and also the phoenix. So that's an ancient conflation. They've been doing that since Mesopotamia. Alternately, the eagle or the scorpion for Scorpio. So you'll notice on a lot of the four living creatures, or the tetramorph, they're sometimes called. They were in Ezekiel's vision. They were in the revelation of John of Patmos, right? He talks about the tetramorph, and you'll see them. This is from Sharp, but if you've ever been in New York City at St. John the Divine, Upper West Side, same thing. You'll see this on a lot of cathedrals. You'll see the lion, the bull, the man, and the eagle. And look, here's Jesus in the Vesica Piscis. And a Vesica Piscis is a fish bladder. So there's this to me screams the vernal equinox in Pisces, surrounded by the fixed signs of the zodiac. This is an astrological or even astronomical situation here. It's saying something about that, as are these four living creatures, otherwise known as the tetramorph. But they didn't start there. They go back to the beginning of the Taurian age, because at the beginning of the Taurian age, during that Taurian age period, you find in Sumer and Acadia and the Assyrians and the Babylonians all shared these what are called Lamassu. And the Lamassu guarded the portals of the ziggurats and other temples. Ziggurats, by the way, were largely astronomical observatories for their magi, or, well, we'll get into them in a second. Chaldean astronomers. So guarding the portals to these ziggurats and temples are, look at this, the hooves of the bull, the body of a bull, the body of a lion and the feet of a lion, the wings of an eagle, the head of a man. These are sphinxes. These are prototypes of every other sphinx that we've seen afterward. They're zoomorphic figures, you would say. They're polymorphic, and they're animals. So andromorphic as well, because they're the head of a man. So these represent the four fixed signs of the zodiac, which we find in their position of the solstices and equinoxes at 4,000 BCE. Now, having noted all of that symbolism changes precessionally among cultures, right? We're going to wind the clock back to 4,000 BCE, or the year of light, the Anno Lucas, and we are going to use that as a temporal vantage point and see how that vantage point allows for a certain penetration of the symbolism of ceremonial magic, Freemasonry, classical mythology, and many mystery religions, but I chose Mithraism as the exemplar of the mystery cults, because it's particularly Taurian, as we'll see. So, again, Egyptian mythology, Hathor, the Apis bull. There's Hathor or Ba'at, sometimes Ba'at. I don't know what this guy is doing with this bull, but you'll see that there is the sun in Taurus, the sun rising in Taurus. You go a little further, but still during the Taurian age, which again was 2000 to 4000 BCE, you'll find in Crete the myth of the Minotaur, right? So Pasiphae was the wife of King Minos, and maybe you know the story, but Zeus sent a bull to impregnate her. She ended up having this half bull, half man monstrosity known as the Minotaur. Theseus came from the mainland because they were sacrificing people. I believe 9 people a year were to be sacrificed, or in the labyrinth on Crete at Minos. I just let Dosh in. So Theseus was sent there to slay the Minotaur, and one of these 2 girls is probably Ariadne, who gave Theseus his thread to weave his way through the labyrinth and slay the Minotaur and be able to find his way out. So a lot of and plus Knossos on Crete is where a lot of the bull leaping happened. So there was just a ton of Taurian. So their whole thing was based on this sort of cattle cult Taurian symbolism. Okay. Also, in more classical Greek mythology, we find a couple more bovine sort of myths here. We find this is called the rape of Europa. So they use the word rape differently. What they meant was just an abduction, pretty much. Much like the rape of Persephone, etc. There's a lot of myths that use that terminology, but it's different. So Zeus disguised himself as a bull because he had found Europa to be very beautiful, and he was often represented in or using bulls as his representation at various times, as we'll see, and as we've already seen with Pasiphae on Crete at Knossos. Anyway, he abducted Europa in the form of a bull. And over here, this is Zeus, the man. And he was laying with another woman named Io. And when Hera, his wife, showed up, preceded by her ever-present peacocks here, which are sacred to her, here's trusty Hermes / Mercury trying to cover up Io, but Zeus is like, I have a better idea. I'm just going to quickly change her into a bull or a cow of some sort. A heifer, actually, is the terminology they use. I'm going to change her into a heifer, and that way I won't get in trouble from Hera, who is obviously upset, and rightfully so, because if you know anything about the myths, Zeus was sort of a philanderer, right? So that's how he got out of that one, by changing Io into a heifer, which was unfortunate for her because she had to just roam the land being tormented by a gadfly sent to her by Hera, who was pretty much aware of what was actually happening there. So in the East, like we mentioned, during this period, there are also, it's corroborated in Eastern symbolism that the during that 2,000-year period, there was an abundance of bovine symbolism, Taurian symbolism. Let's move a little further towards the turn of that millennium into ancient Persia, where the religion of Zoroaster. Now, if you've read any Albert Pike, he just loved talking about Zoroastrianism, and that's late Taurian. That's a late Taurian age religion, and they venerated Gaviodata. That's this bull, the Gaviodata. And what's funny is they not only had the Taurian symbolism, but a minor character in the Zoroastrian, I guess, pantheon was someone called Mitra, who was later known as Mithras. Now, this is actually an Aryan and Piscean carryover of Taurian age symbolism, because Mithraism lasted pretty deep, at least a few hundred years deep into the Piscean age even. So, but it was certainly Taurian, and I'll be able to prove that. I could tell you why it was Taurian, not only because Mithras is a solar anthropomorphization slaying the bull at the vernal equinox. He's the sun at the vernal equinox slaying the bull, which is exactly, that symbolizes the vernal equinox. So that is what's going on in the tauroctony, which is what they call this scene. And it's ubiquitous all over Europe. You'll find tauroctonies. They're bas-reliefs that were present at many, if not all, of the Mithraeum, which were the grottos in which this particular mystery cult met. They made no pretense about it being zodiacal, because you'll notice this zodiacal belt right here. You'll notice this one going around the whole sort of bas-relief there. You'll notice this one here, the twins, etc. Scorpio, the fishes, Pisces, Aries over here. Remember the beginning and the end. The beginning and the end. Another thing of interest to Freemasons is that if you look at this, like say maybe there's two perpendicular parallel lines on either side of that, and then there's a circle here, and then there's a point in the center, and on either side there are these solstitial figures, right? Cautis and Cautopates. Cautis at the summer solstice with his flame pointing upward, and Cautopates at the winter solstice with his flame pointing downward, just like the feasts of Saint John the Baptist near the summer solstice and Saint John the Evangelist near the winter solstice. These are essentially the Saints John. They're providing the exact same symbolic purpose here. They're signifying the same thing. Now, remember when I said I could prove that this was a Taurian age thing? Because here on most of these, if not all of them, yeah, I think all of them. See this dog? That is one of the Cani constellations, probably Canis Major. This is Hydra, the water snake. See that snake right here on all of these? Hydra. And then biting the penis of this bull, you could barely see it on all of them, but biting the penis of the bull on all of these bas-reliefs and sculptures is a scorpion. So if you were to draw the rest of the line while the sun was rising at the vernal equinox in Taurus, if you were to draw the rest of the line of the ecliptic, it will follow in succession through the Cani constellations, through Hydra, the water snake, and through Scorpio before it gets back. So this is got to be an allusion to the Taurian age, 4000 BCE, the Analucus. So speaking of more cattle cult sort of situations, we find the cult of the Magna Mater which was still extant during later into the period, but still a vestige of the cattle cults, etc. Here's a Mithraeum. They were underground grottos, and they were usually by a water ford. And I'll tell you why. Because there was a practice, definitely among the cult of the Magna Mater, a bull cult, right, a cattle cult, but probably among the Mithraic cult as well, because they were in underground grottos, and there was this sequence in their initiation where they underwent what's called a taurobolium. Obviously the prefix toro in there denotes the bull, right, etymologically. So the taurobolium is when they would do a blood baptism in a pit, right? And they would situate the Mithraea and the Magna Mater temples near a water ford. You could read about this in Angus's Mystery Religions. They did this near a water ford, presumably so they could clean out all that blood, because if you're cutting a bull's throat and putting it in this pit, it's going to go rancid in there. You're going to have all kinds of problems inside of these little grottos, right? Covered with bull's blood, etc. So, wrong way. Anyway, so a funny little anecdote about this is, you know that the Mithraism was the preferred cult of the Roman legionaries, and you know that Hadrian's Wall went all the way up into Scotland, I believe, certainly the northern parts of the UK up around, I've seen parts of it in Newcastle, and way up there. So there is in there was in when settlers came upon the area that would be Oxford, they found the story goes that they found a bas relief from a Mithraeum, one of their underground grottos. They found the bull, and it was by a water ford. So hence the name Oxford, because of leftovers from the reseeded Roman legionaries who had left one of their Mithraea up there. And there's still many of them. There's one in London that you can go and see. They're all over the UK, Mithraea. So let's get into Freemasonry, particularly the Suppendant Body, the Holy Royal Arch, right? You'll notice on their banner, in this heraldic crest, right, the shield, the man, the lion, the bull, the eagle. And what are they surrounded by? Two solstices. So these are the solstices and the equinoxes, if you look at this through the astrological lens, right? These are the fixed signs of the zodiac. And on either side of them are these androsphinxes, you know, rams, eagles, men, you know, who basically this, since they're flanking it on either side, that could be read to mean that they are some sort of solstitial marker. Here you'll notice again another excuse me, another heraldic shield with the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man. The lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man. Now this is interesting because it's obviously an updated Royal Arch, because where does the summer solstice occur now? It occurs in Cancer, and they put, if you know anything about astrological glyphs, that is the glyph, that is the zodiacal glyph for Cancer. So you see Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. So you've got this is very clear astrological symbolism on this Masonic tracing board. You've got the vernal equinox in Aries, which is where we currently fix it. That's where NASA says the 0 hour right ascension is in Aries. And in tropical astrology and astronomy, you'll find that the summer solstice is the keystone of the Royal Arch. It's when the sun is at its apex, at the zenith. So thereby, the keystone being Cancer. And then, of course, the scales for the autumnal equinox. See what time it is. Oh, we got 20 minutes. So, so now speaking more, getting more into the Masonic usage of the symbolism and in the appendant bodies, there's a body called the Societas Rosicruciana, the Societas Rosicruciana, the Masonic Rosicrucian Society. And there are 4 ancients in a particular grade that is practiced there. And on the stoles, you can't see them here, but on these stoles, well, you can make out Aquarius right here. You can make out Taurus here. This one is Scorpio for water because it's a water sign. So this one is Leo, red for the lion. And they are in the first order rituals. You'll find that there is a definite, not even trying to hide it, symbolic allusion to this elemental triplicity, the fixed signs of the zodiac, and even denoting clearly their zodiacal glyphs. You could see them here as well on the pentagrams. There's a pentagram of each cardinal direction on this Rosicrucian cross, which was a post Masonic Rosicrucian society called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they used the glyphs for Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and the eagle for Scorpio. Now, just so you could see that again, look, this translates it right there for you. Just add 4,000 years. So when this was built in 1952, if you were to go back 5,952 years, you'd be at the year 4000 BCE, the commencement of the Taurian age. Pretty much any Masonic building and some non-Masonic buildings are going to have that AL on it if Masons laid the cornerstone. It should be in the northeast corner. Now, going back a little bit, back to the commencement, again, back to the Taurian age itself, that 2,000-year period, we find the Magi, or sometimes referred to as just as Chaldeans, Chaldean astronomers in the Babylonian period, right? And here they are, they're using a plumb, they're using astrolabes and T quadrants and things like that. And essentially, these are the same tools that one would use in navigation. Just lay it sideways. Lay this thing sideways and you're navigating horizontal space on the water, or you could do it by the stars, etc. And these are, of course, tools used in building, right? So there's a sequence in one of our lectures where we talk, it might be in the G. I'm not going to do the whole thing, of course, but geometry and the arts dependent on it. So the G is figures prominently in Freemasonry, and one definition of that G is that it stands for geometry. And geometry is, of course, the basis of astronomy, astrology, temple architecture or any architecture, and navigation, etc. Not to mention, abstract geometry that doesn't have to deal with a physical object or subject. So the Babylonians using those, or really the Sumerians, the Sumerians were the first to break up the ecliptic into 360 degrees. Now think about how heavy that is, because 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, during the Taurian age, the Sumerians came up with the 360 degree circle. So you already know that the decimal system is our fingers, right? You got 10 fingers. So those are our counting integers. So when you're thinking, how many apples do I have in my basket? Oh, I've got 3 apples, right? You're just counting with integers, like on your fingers. So all of that stuff is base 10 or decimal. However, everything to do everything that we communicate with each other that has anything to do with space or time is sexagesimal. So it has everything to do with this 360-degree circle that was delineated by the ancient Sumerians during the Taurian age so long ago, thousands of years ago, at the Taurian age, the Analucus. So they came up with this 360-degree circle and these arc segments of the ecliptic. And what I mean by everything spatial and temporal, when you talk about 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 72 hours, 96, 120, all of these numbers, 360, all of these numbers are sexagesimal and they're all temporal numbers. So when we communicate time to each other, I'll see you at 6:30. We're talking in the language of in the mathematical language of the Sumerians and how they divided from their astronomical observations, how they divided the ecliptic. In fact, NASA will still say 60 minutes, 30 seconds, whatever, when they're talking about minutes and seconds of declination and right ascension and things like that. So, oh, and as far as space, these are our spatial numbers as well as based on that 360-degree circle. Because when we talk about a 90-degree angle, when we talk about a cube, when we talk about any sort of spatial geometry, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 dimensions, when we're talking about geometry, the only terms we have at our disposal are the degrees which come to us through this sexagesimal system. 15 degrees, 10 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 360. These spatial and temporal numbers come to us from the Babylonians, or the Sumerians, who preceded the Babylonians by a couple of civilizations in Mesopotamia. But what I'm showing you here are just magical sort of divisions of these used in ceremonial magic. This is the Shem HaMephorash that you find in, I think I got this from Kircher. So these are just divisions these are the decans and the quintances. Now, the quintances are especially important. Like the name implies, they're 5-degree segments, arc segments of the ecliptic, and they're associated with a certain jinn, D-J-I-N-N, from whence we get our word genie, right? So in the Quran and in the Arabian Nights, you'll read about Suleiman, and in the Quran and in the Arabian Nights, you read about Suleiman, who is Solomon. And he had a brass vessel in which he captured the 72 jinn, and he had pantacles or sigils or items with which he could control them. And in fact, Solomon, in this tradition, Solomon summoned the powers of the jinn to create the temple, the first temple. And that's established in Islam and in the Arabian Nights, their sort of mythology. Now here is what's called the Goetia, right? There's a certain practice that there are 72 demons to be controlled, and where you find this practice, no, it's not Satanism or anything super strange. I mean, it's not to be messed with if you haven't kind of studied it a great deal, right? But this is essentially based on the Shem HaMephorash as well, and it's based on those quinantic arc segments of the 360-degree circle, right? These pantacles are used to control various goetic demons, and when I say demon, I don't mean like Linda Blair demon. I mean it like in the Platonic sense, how Plato had a demon and it was like his higher self. So these demons could be made to work for you much in the manner of Solomon. And the reason why I say much in the manner of Solomon is because all of this goetic stuff is found in a grimoire called the Key of Solomon the King. So the Key of Solomon the King, which is a 17th century or 18th, I think it's 17th century grimoire, uses these goetic demons, much like Suleiman used the jinn to create the temple. So it makes you think, the temple, is it the temple of the heavens, the house not made with hands? You know, what temple are we talking about? On what hermetic micro macro scale are we talking about the construction of this temple? Is it a temple within man, in his heart, in his mind? Is it a terrestrial temple like we have in downtown Phoenix, or the Scottish Rite Temple in downtown Tucson? Or is it a celestial temple, as the name implies? A templum was an area of the sky, an, an oblong square in the sky marked off by the Roman augurs to do astrology and augury, bird divination. I know I'm going fast, but I get into all this stuff in detail in the book. So if you're confused, reach out to me or get the book, and you can take it at your own pace. This we can kind of blur through, but I just wanted to say, there's the man, there's the eagle, there's the lion, there's the bull. They definitely represent the fixed signs of the zodiac. They also represent the 4 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Here's the pentagram ritual, cardinal points. There's an association with the fixed signs of the zodiac at each of them. Here's the elemental pentagram, where you'll notice that these, the points of it elementally correspond also to the fixed signs of the zodiac during the Taurian age. So this is my last slide, so we're almost there. But I just wanted to kind of bring it back down into Freemasonry. You see the banner back there? Guess who's on that heraldic crest there? There are things that we do in Freemasonry, such as circumambulation, the orientation of our temples oriented to the east. You know, we're very big on orientation, even the word orientation. I mean, look at it for a second. It means to face east. Orientation, right? So there are many allusions to this Taurian age in ceremonial magic, in solar and astrological symbolism in Freemasonry, in mystery cults such as Mithraism, and in classical mythology. We're constantly alluding to these precessional cycles, and particularly the Taurian age in Freemasonry. One other thing I've been studying recently was this Urim and Thummim. The Urim and Thummim. I read a great paper on that recently. I forget the woman's name, but she was out of Bath, England. A great academic paper on how this has to do with ancient astrologers in Babylon. So Chaldean astrologers who used a similar method, and these were actually corresponding to some of our modern attributions of gemstones for the months. So these were she made a very, very strong case for the zodiacal correspondences of the Urim and Thummim. So that's all I got. I'm gonna stop the share screen, and hopefully we got a few minutes to do Q&A. Let's see, it's 7:57, but if we could take a few minutes, that'd be great if anybody has any questions.
Hey, Jamie, this is Tim.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, I saw one kind of pattern I noticed. It seemed like a combination between the Judeo-Christian and the Mithras. Did you see a lot of, or evidence of overlap between, or like blurring between the practices?
It's been pretty well documented that that there was some cultural mingling in terms of feast dates, particularly, um, and if you talk about Freemasonry and Mithraism, there are actually a lot of overlaps. I wouldn't argue, and I don't think anybody would argue for an unbroken succession spanning for, other than Albert Mackey, who did make that argument, for an unbroken succession from Mithraism into Freemasonry. But they were Mithraic initiates were known as syndexioi, which means brothers of the grip, or friends of the grip. They knew each other by a certain grip. In fact, they had a grade called Leo, and it was the lion grade, and there was a certain grip that was associated with that. There are fragments of a catechism, a Mithraic catechism, where it says, and I quote this in my book, in Myth, Magic, and Masonry, where it says, how became, sorry, it says, how became you a Leo? And then you're supposed to answer by being put in a pit, you know, because there was some sort of ordeal. And there's this back and forth that is so eerily like your typical Masonic catechism. It's the cadences. I mean, it's really funny to read, you know, not haha funny. I mean, it's like peculiar, like that these are so dead on. Oh, and the pater was essentially in the worshipful master role of the Mithraeum. And there are many other similarities. In fact, I go through a lot of them in that section of the book.
Yeah, it just seems like maybe there was a common thread that wove between those things, and possibly Freemasonry too. I don't know. It almost as if there's like outer and public versions of each of them. Not that Mithras was very public, or I don't know how public it was, but like in
It
common
was
run through them.
Oh yeah, it was very public. In fact, it was the preferred cult of the Roman legionaries, so they made no secret about it. It was a soldier's cult primarily, but it was widely practiced by emperors, by the nobility in Roman society. In fact, we are we were we were within a hair's breadth of being a Mithraic Western culture, right? I mean, it's only because of Constantine and the Council of Nicaea and things like that where they really chopped up Christianity and figured out what they wanted to be canonical and what they wanted to be apocryphal, and kind of assembled the Holy Bible in with the New Testament, etc., and codified Christianity. We were this close to being to Western civilization being Mithraic. I mean, it could have happened easily. And you'll notice that many cathedrals and chapels and things in Europe are built exactly on top of Mithraea. Yeah, you could look those up where they just built it right on top of them as a tell. So yeah, it was not a huge secret. It was just a decision to, okay, we're going to make this the state religion as opposed to Mithraism, like flicking a switch, but that could have been flicked the other polarity easily.
Jaime, you were talking about the Chaldeans. I have a Bible that I had to like submit my social, my birth certificate for. It was out of New Zealand, and it's called the Colburn, and it was held by the Chaldean Trust. And it's a very interesting Bible, very, very interesting. It's written with a lot of passion and alignment with the Holy Spirit or the earth energy, talking about the romance of creation and how the breath of God was put into all of us. And it's probably the most romantic story of creation I've ever read. But why is that Bible so guarded?
I would think, well, I could tell that in a kind of roundabout way. There was a clergyman named the Venerable Beda, Bede, in Germany in the Middle Ages, and he was upset because he didn't want to live under a pagan sky, because he noted that all of the constellations were pagan, Greek and classical mythological images. So he decided, okay, I'm going to Christianize the heavens. So he drew Beda's star map sometime in the Middle Ages. I forget exactly when. He drew his star map, and where you had Cetus the whale, he put Jonah and the whale. Where there was Krator the cup, he put the Holy Grail, and et cetera, et cetera. He went through all of the constellations and he Christianized them. But then, according to Manly Hall, somebody said to Venerable Beda, "Oh, you're kind of letting the cat out of the bag. You need to hide this thing," because he had given away the pagan roots of Christian astrological symbolism, or he had given away the fact that Christianity was almost a greatest hits mystery cult in its beginning. Because you got to remember, before the Council of Nicaea, there were Gnostic Christians, there were sort of Neoplatonic Christians, there were, and would also be again in the Renaissance, Hermetic Christians. There were there wasn't just this edifice that was Christianity that was concentrated into this system, right? They were disparate. There were the Essenes, there was all kinds of, in the Alexandrian sort of milieu of theological and philosophical cults. Christianity was this amorphous blob that wasn't a concentrated thing yet. So getting back to your question, I would say maybe one of the reasons why they hide this particular Chaldean Bible, whether you're talking about a Zend Avesta, I'm not sure what, or if it's some sort of...
I've read the Avesta on a plane. It took me about 6 months, but that's different. This is
That's a long plane ride.
Yeah, it was like 20 trips for work. And so I read through it. It was neat. That was interesting, but not near as interesting. And I haven't read the whole Colburn. I've just skimmed through it. But the Colburn is something I had to submit all this intel about my life, who I was born from, to get an actual copy. There is a guy that's mimicked it, but he's diluted and rewritten, and you just can't rewrite that book. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Can you get me a PDF of it without me submitting to all the
They won't,
private data?
but if you send me your address, I will mail you mine. It was like
No.
$5. Yeah, you can mail it back to me. Yeah. Or I'll see you sometime and you can give it back to me.
Yeah, let's do that.
Very interesting. Very interesting. The other thing I was going to ask you was, or what I was going to tell you my insight on, is Jesus was a Gnostic. In order to obtain all of the things they discussed, that he got his Christ crown and all, he had to travel through all of the Sephiroth tree and go through those levels of consciousness to reach and obtain that divine energy. So I believe it kind of goes back to an order called Melchizedek, which came from Adam. And so you have the or however you say it. I don't talk to it. You're the first people I've talked to, so I may not pronounce things right, but Melchizedek was the order of basically the angels, and it was basically the order of creation from the angels. And so Adam passed it on through bloodlines, and then Jesus was pulled into it. I don't know, I think through his mother, because his mother was a part of that family bloodline, Mary. And so as you go through the levels of the consciousness of the Sephiroth tree in Kabbalah, I don't know if I'm talking to people that even know what that is, but it's interesting how when he came back through, he asked John and he said, "Who do you say I am?" So it makes me wonder if John had the word and he anointed him basically and then gave him the word. So if it was like an initiation, and so I don't know. It's just interesting to read through this stuff and go back to the Bible after you've learned different things in the higher realms. Then you go read the Bible and it's like, wow.
Well, particularly you bring it,
Initiations all throughout it. It's crazy.
that you're bringing up John, I think, is telling, particularly in a Gnostic sense, right? So
Yeah.
John the Baptist, whose day is in about a week, next Wednesday. Actually, my new book is coming out on John the Baptist Day.
It's interesting.
So that's it's by design. So so 6/24 next Wednesday, and that's John the Baptist Day, and there's a lot of sort of Johannine Gnostic kind of stuff that follows that current around through the Albigenses, through the Cathari. You kind of see that Johannine current of Christianity as opposed to, I guess, what you might call a Paul's church, the Pauline kind of current. I guess they're kind of
Yeah.
split off at some point. Yeah.
I love it.
What's interesting about that is, even if it's the Osirian mysteries bleeding into Hellenistic mystery cults and mystery religions, and then into Christianity, and however this narrative, this base narrative, finds expression culturally among different people in different situations. What I think that sort of speaks to is Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, because you notice that no matter what continent you're on, beavers know how to make a dam, and they didn't confer on that. They didn't need to call each other up and figure that out. So whether it's a lineal succession from cult to cult, hey, do it this way, so you have a death and rebirth sort of scene in your initiatic rite. They probably didn't talk to each other about that stuff, or maybe some did and it evolved here and there, but that sort of stuff happens naturally, because I think because it's a natural process of rites of passage. So Arnold van Gennep was he came up with the term a rite of passage, right? And he posited that there are 3 liminal stages in initiation, and we have them in Freemasonry. There is a separation, a transformation, and a reintegration stage, and these are common in every culture. You'll find this everywhere. It's the sequence of initiation. There are little peculiarities between cultures, of course, right? But the main expression of initiation invariably follows this certain pattern, and that it happens without us having to communicate it across continents. But separation, transformation, reintegration, and other little minutia in there that gets covered. And I think that in terms of the dying and resurrecting God theme, Fraser dealt with it in his Golden Bough. Of course, it's in Christianity. We find that the death and resurrection, the whole Easter in a cave deal. I'm not even going to bring up the central allegory of Freemasonry, But if you think about our allegory that we have, it definitely follows a cyclical pattern that has all of the same motifs and could definitely be interpreted as an astrological or even an agricultural. So you would say astrotheological or agrotheological, right? So if it's astrotheological, you're basically theologizing the movement of the heavens, like say the sun's passage through the 12 signs of the zodiac in an annual circuit. If it's agrotheology, that could be something like, see you, Kevin Fuller. Kevin's cutting out. If it's agrotheological, that means it has to do with grains, as in the Eleusinian mysteries, or the grape, as in the Dionysian mysteries, where it's about wine, so it's the death and rebirth, or the Osirian mysteries, which were agricultural. They had to do with the black earth of the Nile river delta and the river valley. So the Assyrian mysteries were agrotheological. And, it's just something, when we're theologizing natural events, or celestial events, we're all going to do that approximately the same way. Even look at the 12 labors of Heracles or Hercules. That's just the sun going through the 12 signs of the zodiac over the course of a year. Who does he fight? The Nemean lion, the Cretan bull, you could see that pattern. It's ubiquitous in our all of our myths and theologies.
Do you have a big, like a good way to explain the Isis and Osiris situation that happened?
I think I think that one's primarily agricultural, but there is an interesting piece of that in that it could also be read alchemically, right? But there's a nice part where they talk about his 15 pieces being dispersed. So let me see if I could remember these. Mackey points this out, and you find them in the Eleusinian mysteries, or what we know of the Eleusinian mysteries as well. They're called the Athanasis, there's 4 Greek terms that cover the 4 points where there's a disappearance, there's a death, a pastos, there's a discovery, or a euresis, I think they call it, and there's a full revelation, which is called an autopsy in Greek, right? So there's the aphanasis, the pastos, the euresis, and the autopsy. These were the 4 cycles of that you find in the Osirian and Isaic mysteries, right? And you also find them in Freemasonry. If you know what I'm talking about, a disappearance. Where is this guy? A death, a burial or a pastos, and then a full autopsy, a sort of raising, a full disclosure, a full revelation. And what's interesting about that Osirian cycle is that the 15 parts of Osiris, right? 15 hidden parts, and they end up in Byblos, and they end up here and there, and they need to be assembled, right? And you could think of this as the lunar aspect of it, syncing up the lunar calendar with the solar agricultural cycle, right? Because 15 parts is, of course, a new moon to a full moon. And just like, say, I don't want to get too into this, but there's a number 15 that's also used in in Freemasonry regarding this a certain cycle that's very similar.
Thank you. That's really neat. So I'm naturally drawn to the moon cycles. They work for me, and I don't do things that are witchy or nothing like that. It's just a natural, Mithra's natural, if it was pure before it got, into the crazy corruption. But when Mithra started out, it was pure. And it's kind of that same thing, the moon cycles. As you're gaining to, from a full moon to a new moon, you break off, the things you don't want. As the moon is losing light, and then at a new moon, you put a lot of intention on what you want. And then as the moonlight grows to a full moon, it manifests. And then basically a full moon is death and a new moon is birth, in my opinion. But it's just kind of how it works for me. Every time I'm on Facebook and I post a moon cycle, know that I'm doing something.
Well, that totally makes sense. I mean, look at the tidal cycle, is regulated, of course, by the moon, and there's a certain amount of salt in the salt water that causes this gravitational bulge, right? And if I'm not mistaken, a woman's menstrual cycle will sync up to the lunar cycles if they're left to nature. I've read that someplace. That might be wrong, but it's
No,
about.
It's true, definitely.
Yeah. So the women have a microcosmic moon inside of them. That's why, it's no mystery why men have been portrayed as being solar, active, and masculine, whereas women have been portrayed as being receptive, lunar, and feminine. It's because women have a microcosmic moon in their body. It's the menstrual cycle. Even etymologically, the men's is the moon. A month is a moon. It's they have the same etymological root, so it's no mystery. And then, of course, not to get too into it, but there's a masculine counterpoint with the phallus and solar symbolism, like a gnomon, if you know what that is, or the analemata. There's it definitely corresponds symbolically, and that is another ubiquitous theme that spans pretty much all cultures except Japan. For some reason, in Japan, the sun is feminine and the moon is masculine. I don't know why that is.
Well, that goes really deep down a rabbit hole. Real deep.
Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Dosh.
How's it going? Sorry, I missed the second part of your lecture, but caught the tail end of it, and it was really
great
good.
to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
How's it going?
A-okay.
Nice. I was gonna ask about, you mentioned the temple being related to the templum, like of the stars, or the augury, and it made me think of like the temple of our brain. And do you think there's a connection with the 12 cranial nerves and the temple of our head?
I seem to remember reading something about that. And just like we were talking about with that little microcosmic lunar cycle in a woman, I think it's important to, yes, maybe physically in the temple of our brain, but I know you're interested in the Florentine Academy and maybe Bruno and things, and the Ars Memoria, right? And how Bruno had created the ecliptic, including the zodiacal signs and including the decans and the quinances in his sort of memory palace, right? And I just recently had to learn to qualify as senior warden this year. I had to learn the fellowcraft degree, open, close, obligate, and everything that happens from the East, right? And in doing so, I had to sit again, like I've done many times over the years, and digest a large chunk to memory, right? And I think that one of the one of the main hermetic aspects of Freemasonry is that we're creating a temple inside of ourselves, in our hearts, in our minds, terrestrially, celestially, and supernally, even the house not made with hands. I think that there are so many hermetic scales, like fractals of this I guess Templarism. There, this building of a temple is so foundational to what we do. I mean, we say it over and over again in our rituals, and we actually do it, I think, at least on one level, through that Ars Memoria, through that temple building of the memory, which is why you look at a tracing board and it's always oriented. They always say, this is the east, this is the west, this is the south, this is the north, and when you're let's say, when you're led around and you don't have certain senses at your disposal at certain times, you have to spatially create that temple in your mind, and you have to do it sort of astrally as well, and you have to do it in memory, and that fascinates me, that it's just this fractal, this hermetic chain, like Ficino's chains, of Sunthamata and things like that we have these chains of temples proceeding from our very most inward temples to the most celestial or supernal temples. Does that kind of fit with your?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I know there's supposedly a connection with the 12 cranial nerves and the 12 astrological signs too, but it's not something I've really looked into that deeply.
And even if it's not a physical, like one-for-one correlation, just that it's there and that we're making meaning out of it and symbolizing it, and that you're talking about it and I'm talking about it, speaks to that. That's meaning. That's our hermeneutic on it, right? So I think that that's just as meaningful as somebody saying, no, when the sun is in Aries, this particular cranial nerve vibrates. I mean, that would be nice to find out, but we don't need to find that out for it to be real,
True, yeah. And then one other question I had was, do you think the switch between Mithraism and Christianity follows a pattern of switching the predominant symbolism of the astrological cycle, meaning the switch from Taurus, to like the Piscean nature of Christianity?
Well, I think, like I was saying, I don't know if you missed that part, but I said Roman Mithraism, which is a later version of Mithraism, because he was, of course, a minor player in the Zoroastrian pantheon, which would have placed him in the Taurian age. He was sort of co-opted for this soldier's cult, kind of via Anatolia. I think it made its way from Persia through Anatolia and then down into Greece, and then just over that arc into Rome. But it was a vestige of Taurian symbolism. And did you see the part where we were talking about the Cani constellations, Hydra, the water snake, and Scorpio?
Only in relation to the Mithric relief with the bull being slain.
Exactly.
And yeah, that part, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Tauroctony. So that right there tells you that they are definitely hearkening back to the Taurian age. But they were not themselves in the Taurian age at that point. They were on the cusp of the Piscean and Aryan ages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Tosh.
I was going to double dip because I'm slow.
Yeah, do it.
So you were talking before about the catechism that the candidates had as they went through it. Did you learn any more about things that they studied? Like, I know that things like the Kabbalah have been around forever, and some of the other things that people in mystery tradition study, like I guess astrology would be the parent, but did you find any evidence of, things that people in the school might have dug into, or besides beyond like the the suspected things?
Yeah, so it looks like Mithraism was largely collegiate in a way. It was more of like a social collegiate thing. There was a lot of agape style, what you would call in early Christianity, a love feast.
Yeah.
Where they had these agape style communal meetings where they would do certain what we would call toasts. So there was a lot of the communal bonding, but there was certainly an initiatic structure, starting with the Korax. Let me see if I can name them. There was the Korax, or the crow, and that was associated with Mercury. There was the bridegroom, or nymphus, which was associated with Venus. There was Anyway, there was the Chaldean order of planets, or the Neoplatonic spherical order of planets, ending in Saturn, the seventh sphere, at Pater. So, so they certainly had what you would call a Neoplatonic cosmology about their thing, which is to say that the planets are concentrically nested in these spheres, ending in Saturn and sort of beginning at the lunar sphere. Thanks, Andrew. We'll see you. Andrew's cutting out. So, so they had a Neoplatonic cosmology. They did communal dining, and they had an initiatic cycle that followed this. That had working tools at each grade. So there was, yeah, for Potter, I think they had the like a Liberty Cap and a Sith, a small hand Sith, which is perfectly appropriate for Saturn, right? They had weirdly like accurately corresponding working tools for each planetary grade, and you can in fact see mosaics of them. I think even on the Wikipedia article it's that known. If you look at the Wikipedia article for Mithraism, I'm pretty sure they show the mosaics for each grade that show by any other name, the sacra or the working tools of that grade and how they planetarily correspond. So it was a system. It was a fully fleshed out system.
You could almost, it sounds like you can almost recreate some of these degrees.
They have. I think in England there is a Mithraic order that is Masonic. It's an invitational.
Huh.
Yeah. I don't know if we have it in the States, but I know that there's a Masonic Grotto of Mithras or whatever. I forget what it's called.
Oh, the grotto?
Not the grotto.
Not the one that looks like the Shriners?
Yeah, not that one. That's a different one. Yeah, that's the mystic veiled order of the enchanted realm. I think is their name, which is a pretty cool name.
Yeah.
But not those guys.
Man, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Now you were talking about with the mystery cults, and the one I read that the most seems maybe, I don't know, parallels or influences Freemasonry is the Grecian history club of what, Dionysus?
Yeah, so Mackie has a good, if somewhat fantastic, story about that. I think, in that, let's say the building of King Solomon's temple 3,000 years ago or whenever it was historical, that actually happened, which who knows, right? at the building of King Solomon's temple, according to Mackey, Tyrian workmen, so workmen from Phoenicia, were sent by King Hiram, who was a historical figure, King Hiram of Phoenicia. They were sent to build the temple, and according to Mackey, who I think maybe gets it from DaCosta, they were practicing their Dionysian rites because they had sort of a proto version of Dionysius, and they were the original Dionysian artificers, and they brought their rites to the Holy Land as they were erecting the temple over the whatever, I think it was 10 years or something, 12 years or whatever. And during that time, they had initiated some of the Jews who were also workmen there. But when the Tyrian workmen went back to Phoenicia, or the Phoenician workmen went back to Byblos, Sidon, wherever they were from in Phoenicia, the Jews held on to the structure of the Dionysian mysteries, but replaced it with the workmen that we know in our Masonic mysteries. So they Judaicized these to them pagan mysteries, and I thought that was an interesting story. And that's the thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be historically true for it to be considerable allegorically, just like Atlantis. I don't necessarily believe that there was an island with concentric rings that was Atlantis and it fell into I don't believe in Atlanteans per se, strictly, right? But I do believe that it's whether you read it in Plato talking about Solon, who told him about it, etc., or in Edgar Cayce, wherever you get it from, or even Graham Hancock, right? So it's still an allegorical flood myth, kind of. It's a myth, right? And myths are just as important, I think, to us culturally and psychically, as Herodotus and his histories, or Josephus, or people like that, where they're trying to lay down actual history. I think these hiero histories, what you would say, a holy history, and these allegories and these myths still carry with them a numinous kind of air of truth, but on a different plane, so no, I don't call it Atlantis. I call it antediluvian civilization. I call it pre-Younger Dryas comet impact civilizations. But there's many ways to approach that. But just because something's a myth doesn't mean it's not essentially true in some way. So looping that back to your question, just because Mackey and DaCosta talk about this transmission from the Dionysian Phoenician mysteries into the Solomonic temple mysteries, right? That we've inherited, or not really inherited, but that we practice in Freemasonry, doesn't mean that it's not in some way, in the collective unconscious or otherwise, in some way true, or that's how I feel about it. And I mean, I think it's great that we all get to make up our own minds about that sort of thing. I don't need something to be historically true for me to find value in it.
Disney will tell you a lot of stuff too, and none of that's true. It's kind of that same deal. So it's good. I have a question. I had some friends, I've told you this before, Jamie, but really a family that came from Egypt and Persia. Father was Persian, mother was Egyptian. So I found out a lot. I was very close with them. But apparently, Dome Rock is where King Solomon had used his seals to seal the jinn that would not obey him, or something to having to do with the Dome of Rock, basically. And I was hearing Tim talk about, I forgot his last name. It slipped my mind, but
Hogan.
yeah, he was talking about the Dome of Rock, how people went in there at a certain time and saw things, like burials and different things down there. But I believe that the seals are given spiritually. It's the only way you can get them. I'm King Solomon's bloodline. I go way back. I've told you that, and Tim knows that. But it's they're spiritually given, I think. Some people have those things written down like your diagrams, but they're a bit off from what I think they are, what you're actually shown. That's just looking into that stuff, you can get in over your head if you don't have order, as in help, friends, and if you're just shown things and you don't have a worshipful master or I'm Eastern Star, but you have to have order and boundaries. And, I got through it, but I didn't know if I would. So you have to be very careful with things, you don't know anything about.
Yeah. And even mundanely, I mean, Israel Regardie, a prominent 20th century occultist, talks about, many psychological pitfalls that can be a detriment to occult practices, right? So he was a clinical psychologist, and he had noted that it could be very, just like you say, if you get mixed up in the occult, it could mean trouble for you, unless, of course, you're kind of in a certain tradition and it's sequenced, and there's some rationality in your approach, and some, because frankly, there is occultism. Occult just means hidden, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are mysteries in the Christian church. There are mysteries, certainly mysteries in Freemasonry. I remember signing my petition when I first joined, and it said right at the top, I was signing this petition for the hidden mysteries of Freemasonry. And I knew I was signing the right document at that point, because that's what I was drawn to,
Awesome. Yeah, I think some of those, I don't even know what you call it, but initiations across the whole, Golden Dawn or wherever, I don't know anything about that stuff, or Rosicrucian, Masonry, Eastern Star, whatever it is, Tarot initiation, whatever it is. I think as you get through, like, where you think you're fighting magic, you realize you're fighting your own inner consciousness and things you've opened or your bloodline opened. And it's not anyone external pushing that at you. It's something you're dealing with generational. And then once you realize that, it's over. It's like hovering on top of the black and white kind of thing. It's like, wow, okay, I didn't have to fight that. You know what I mean? It's just, so once you realize, this is my personal, I know everything is personal, but, it's really interesting when you're on the razor edge and, you realize a lot. When you think you're hanging on, you don't realize you don't have to hang on. It's just pressure that you thought was there, and it's just another barrier, another veil, kind of goes back to the thing of Atlas holding up the earth. You can wear yourself out doing that, but then you realize, oh, there's a creator to do that. So then you just walk away and the earth doesn't fall. Those kind of things happen. You know what I mean? Those kind of transitions happen through the process. So, but if you don't have help from people like you, or, different people that you can go to, and it's kind of like, you'll be stuck standing in one place doing one thing and not realize, you know, that you could have passed that up 5 years ago or 5 seconds ago or whatever. So it's interesting. And I've, you know, the only initiation I've been through is Eastern Star, but there's other things that happen in higher places. So you just kind of roll with it and you stick with the people that I would say kind of that the universe talks through and leads you to your next step and your next, you know, veil or something like that, you know.
Sounds like a plan. Hey, could I, before we close up, could I just show you guys one thing? Can I share my screen once more? If you don't mind, I'm gonna, oh wait, how do I get out of this? Escape. I just wanted to show one thing. I hopefully have these pictures. Here, I wanted to show, I think I've got, can you see my screen right now? This is the new book. I just wanted to show it to you. 624. And it's about the 7 liberal arts and Freemasonry in the Western esoteric tradition. I go front to back, just a little commercial. Don't mind me, but I go minutely from the porch through the pillars, up the flight of winding stairs, et cetera, all the way to the middle chamber, approaching the middle chamber. And I go through the entire thing from the perspective of Western esotericism throughout. So I really spend a lot of time on the 7 liberal arts and sciences, which I think is an underdeveloped topic or subject in Masonic literature. I think there's a massive, massive vacuum in our literature where, you know, we just go through it's funny, we go through the fellowcraft degree and then all of a sudden it's just this interstitial degree. It's just this thing that we go through. We literally even say passed. Oh, I passed that, you know? And then all of a sudden we just want to make it to Master Mason, and then we never go back and revisit. We never go back and revisit the totality of our curriculum, which is focused there. And it's something that I wanted to be helpful in remedying. And granted, I took it from the approach of the Western esoteric tradition, just because that's my interest and that's kind of my wheelhouse and my perspective, you know, but believe me that I've gone through it from a historical and kind of a more mainstream perspective as well. Here's what, just real quick, here's what Pierce Vaughn had to say about it. I like this part. In an age of sound bites and tweets, we are reminded of the great Masonic books of Waite, Pike, Wilmshurst, and Ledbetter, where close study was rewarded with many insights and points for meditation. Indeed, one might call this book a college course on the fellowcraft degree. So I was so stoked when he had those words to say. And it's out on 6/24, and every fellowcraft in your life needs that book, I would say. And you, if you've had, or if you're interested in the 7 liberal arts and sciences, or if you're interested in Western esotericism, you know, I'm really proud of it. It's 452 pages. It's massive. So Tim is an EA. Are you? Well, somebody's got to buy Tim one when it's time. But
well, Jamie,
anyway.
I think that you're going to have basically all of Aaron Lodge looking for signed copies. So we're going to have to invite you to come down to Tucson to Lodge sometime.
Oh, I'd love to.
And, you know, maybe, you know, even once the book's out, and give us a couple of months. Those of us that are interested, you know, if we get into our hands, definitely we can have even a bit of a Masonic education night in person.
Sounds good.
And that might be pretty fun as well.
And you open so I can go.
Are you here in Tucson?
No, but I'm not far. I'm in Dallas.
But you know, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Jamie, I really want to thank you for giving the presentation this evening. I thought it was fantastic. All of us are now very much interested in your books. And I really want to thank Jeff Sample for reaching out to you and coordinating this for this evening. I have recorded this entire session, so if there's any aspect where somebody didn't want to be included or something like that, I can try and cut you out. But it's not necessarily for public consumption anyway. It'll probably just be on, kind of on our Facebook group page, or maybe that's where I'll put a link to it or something like that. Jamie, if you want a copy of the video from tonight, that's great. But again, we'd like to invite you down. Anybody that wants to come to Tucson, I'd love to have you. Thanks everybody for coming out this evening.
Thanks, Worshipful.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
I love your book. It actually is making me, I'm reading 4 books right now on top of that, because Hermetic philosophy, so it's definitely opened a new realm for me.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, and I'll see everybody soon. I'm gonna go eat something, but
That's why I kept turning off my camera. I was actually eating.
yeah. So please keep a lookout next week. If we're not Facebook friends, let's make Facebook friends. I'm only going to be on there for another couple of weeks. I can't stand Facebook, but I am going to keep I made an author page that I made my sister-in-law be the admin on. So I'm going to be deleting my account. I'll have the author page, but let's make friends on there, and I'll keep you posted on everything that's happening.
It'll keep your blood pressure down.
Oh yeah, I can't stand it. I don't have the stomach for it.
Have a good night, Jamie.
All right, I'll see you guys.
Thanks everyone. Good night.